So let's start. So today, only one topic. We will talk about the removable partial denture and its components. Kumbaga yung mga parts niya. So definitions, a part not all natural teeth and supporting structure the mucosa, and it can be fixed or removable. Okay, fixed is the fixed partial, removable is the removable partial denture. Removable partial denture is a partial denture that can be removed and replaced in the mouth by the patient. An interim denture is a provisional or a temporary denture is a denture used for short interval of time to provide aesthetics, mastication, occlusal support, convenience, and conditioning of the patient to accept the final or the definitive prosthesis. So when we talk about retention, so this is important. Retention, when we say retention, it is the resistance to removal from the soft tissues or teeth. Okay? So ideally, resistance of movement away, palayo, sa soft tissue. Pag sinabi namang stability, resistance of movement in a horizontal direction, either antero-posteriorly or medio-laterally. Ibig sabihin, ang isang denture na stable, dapat walang rocking movement, no tilting or no rotating movement under mastication. Dapat stable siya. Okay? When we say support, it is the resistance of movement towards naman sa soft tissue pababa. If we are talking about lower arch. Again, if we talk about lower arch, ang retention, resistance of movement, pataas or away from the soft tissue. Kapag naman support, resistance of movement towards the soft tissue, pababa, papunta sa soft tissue. Again, when we talk about lower arch, okay? Abutment is a tooth that supports the partial denture, and a retainer is a component of partial denture that provides retention and support for the partial denture. Okay? General description of removable partial denture, treatment objective, preserve remaining teeth and supporting structures, restore aesthetics and phonetics, restore and improve mastication, restore health, comfort, and quality of life. Indication ng RPDs. So, lengthy edentulous span kapag very long edentulous span that are indicated for or that defeats the purpose of Antes law. So, contraindicated siya for FPD, then indication siya for removable partial denture. And if there's no posterior abutment for fixed prosthesis, for example, distal free end cases, posterior distal free end cases, excessive alveolar bone loss, okay? Poor prognosis for complete dentures due to residual ridge morphology, reduced periodontal support of the remaining teeth, cross-arch stabilization if the case is bilateral edentulous spaces, need for immediate replacement of extracted teeth, and cost-patient desire consideration. So classifications of RPD, this is according to location. So when we say unilateral RPD, so unilateral restoration lamang. Replacement of missing tooth or teeth in one side of the arch lang. When we say bilateral RPD, so replacement of missing tooth or teeth of both side of the dental arch. So we are restoring bilateral areas. Okay? According naman to the supporting structure, so tooth-borne, this is a tooth-bounded cases. It receives support from the abutment teeth. Okay? Support from the abutment teeth which are located anteriorly and posteriorly from the edentulous space. Again, tooth-borne are tooth-bounded cases. Okay? Tissue-borne naman receives or derives support entirely from the tissue or underlying mucosa and bone. So this is more of immediate denture or temporary denture. or the lack of partial denture will result to a very poor prognosis because walang retention ang ating partial denture kahit pa immediate denture siya. Then when we say tooth tissue bore naman, some will call it a true RPD. So it is supported both by the abutment and the mucosa and the underlying tissue. This is referred to as the true RPD and has at least a free end extension basis. So usually makikita natin ang true RPD or tooth tissue bone kapag class 1 and class 2 Kennedy case. Sa tooth bounded cases naman, Kennedy class 3. Okay? According to material use, one-piece casting consists of parts of partial denture that are casted in one piece. So usually chromium cobalt. So in the whole course of RPD of our lecture, we will focus more on this topic, one-piece casting lang. One-piece casting skeleton, same as one-piece casting except for skeleton-like framework, which was to be filled mostly by resin materials and individually casted clasp assembly. So only the clasp assembly ang casted and the rest are filled by resin materials. And then wire clasp assembly usually meant for immediate denture or a temporary denture uses orthodontic wires for its clasp or regular wrought wire clasp. Okay. But then again, ang focus natin will always be one-piece casting for a definitive removable partial denture prosthesis. Components ng RPD. Number one is the major connector. So a major connector is the component of partial denture that connects the parts of the prosthesis located on one side of the arch with those on the opposite side. Ibig sabihin, one side of the arch papunta sa opposite side. Okay? It is that unit of partial denture to which all other parts are directly or indirectly attached. So this component also provides cross-arch stability to help resist displacement by functional stresses. Again, yung major connector natin, ito siya, yung area na to. So this major connector is meant for its cross-arch stability to help resist displacement during function. Okay? So failure of the major connector to provide rigidity may be manifest by traumatic damages. One is periodontal support of the abutment teeth, damage or injury to the residual ridge, and impingement of the underlying tissue. So dapat pala, since ang major connector is its focus is cross-arch stability, okay, and resist displacement by functional stress, the major connector should provide or dapat ang isang major connector should be rigid. Okay? Yan ang pinaka-importante. Dapat ang material na gagamitin natin sa major connector natin, if we wanted a cross-arch stability, dapat rigid siya or anything na matigas. So, one or ideally, the material of choice would be a chromium cobalt one-piece casting. Okay? Location ng major connector. Sabi dito, major connector should be free of movable tissue. So, dapat hindi siya doon sa area na movable. Impingement of gingival tissue should be avoided also. Bony and soft tissue prominences should be avoided during placement and removal. A relief should be provided beneath a major connector to prevent it settling into areas of possible interferences, such as inoperable palatal tori or mandibular tori, or bony abnormalities, elevated median palatal sutures. Okay. Major connectors should be located or relieved to prevent impingement of tissue because distal extension denture rotates its function. Okay. So, dapat daw ang isang major connector dapat may relief sa any movable soft tissue. So, to accomplish this, it is recommended that the superior border of the lingual bar, which is a major connector of lower arch, should be located at a minimum of 4 millimeters below the gingival margin. Ibig sabihin pala, from the free gingival margin papunta sa superior border ng ating major connector, dapat we have at least 4 millimeters. So, ito yung area that talks about 4 millimeter of relief. Okay? This is cross-sectional image of our major connector. Okay? Dapat may 4 millimeter of relief. This is lower arch. Okay? Now, for the upper, to accomplish this, it is recommended that the border of the palatal connector should have at least 6 millimeters away from the gingival margin. Minor connector that must cross gingival tissue should do as abruptly, joining major connector at nearly right angle. So again, from the free margin or to the movable margin or to the margin of the remaining natural teeth, dapat 6 millimeters away from the superior border. Okay? So, sa lower, 4 millimeters. Sa upper, 6 millimeters. Okay? So, mandibular major connectors. Okay? This is, pag-usapan na natin mga types of major connectors. So, one is a lingual bar. This is the most common or the basic form of mandibular major connector. Half pear in shape. Ganyan yung itsura niya sa cross-section. Located above the moving tissue but as far below the gingival tissue as possible. Again, relief of at least 4 millimeters. Okay? It is usually made of reinforced 6 gauge, half pear shape, wax, or similar plastic pattern. Okay? So this is how the lingual bar looks like. When we say lingual plate, so if the rectangular spaces bounded by the lingual bar, the anterior tooth contacts and singular, bordering minor connectors is filled in and it is called lingual plate. So ibig sabihin pala, together with the lingual bar, there is a plating around the remaining natural teeth papunta to sa lingual bar natin. And all of the lingual plate should made as thin as possible and should be following all the contours of the remaining natural teeth. You can see here. So, dapat fina-follow nung plating natin yung cingulum area ng remaining natural teeth. Okay? This is also an example of a major connector in the lower. We call it lingual plating. Okay? Indications for the use of lingual plate is when lingual frenum is high or the space available for lingual bar is limited. And also, this is much more very important, and this is what I always consider in class 1 situation or bilateral distal free end cases. Kamukha nito. Bilateral distal free end cases with residual ridge that have undergone excessive vertical resorption. A correctly designed lingual plate will engage the remaining teeth to help resist horizontal rotation. Okay? Lingual plating, sabi, anong improvement ang mangyayari? Resist horizontal rotation. Or kung sa Tagalog, resist yung ating pag-tilt during function or movement ng sideways and forward and backward movement ng denture natin. Okay? Resist horizontal rotations. And also, one indications of a lingual plate is for stability of periodontically weakened teeth. Splinting with lingual plate can be some of great value when used with definite rest on a sound adjacent teeth. So sabi din pala dito, indication din niya if our remaining natural teeth is periodontic compromise. Again, kapag nakita rin natin, uy, parehas distal free end cases, bilateral distal free end cases. So in that way, it is better to put lingual plate all around our remaining natural, remaining anterior natural, remaining anterior natural teeth. Okay. And also, there should be a definite rest sound adjacent to the teeth. So we call it a terminal rest. So anything na maglalagay tayo ng lingual plating all around our remaining natural teeth, dapat meron tayong terminal occlusal rest. Later on, we'll discuss this more further sa designing ng RPT cases na. And also, its indication is when the future replacement of one or more incisor teeth will be facilitated by the addition of retention loops to an existing lingual plate. Mandibular incisors that are periodontically weak may thus be retained with provisions for possible loss and future additions. So itong isa sa pinakamagandang advantage ng ating lingual plate design of our major connector in the lower arch. Because, for example, we have the remaining natural teeth and for example, periodontically weak na to and in the future natanggal na siya. So in that sense, since we have lingual plating in this area, we can add additional pontic to our existing partial denture. In that case, the patient can still use the existing partial denture even one of the abutment have failed already. So yun yung kagandahan. Imagine if this is just a lingual plate, then there is no room for repair. But if we use a lingual plating in our design of our partial denture, then we have the option to repair this kind of scenes or this kind of problem in the future. Okay? That is why metal framework, especially lingual plating design, is a very, very good definitive restoration. Kaya nagsastand ng very, very long time yung framework natin. Okay? It does not need, no need for doing or refabricating another denture. Pangalawa, sublingual bar. This is the same as lingual bar, but placement is just inferior and posterior to the usual placement. Okay? Contraindication includes, ang contraindication niya, syempre may lingual tori, eye attachment, and interference with the elevation of floor of the mouth during functional movement. We rarely use this kind of design, sublingual bar. Cingulum bar naman, napakaganda rin ito. Some will call it continuous bar or some nowadays call it Kennedy bar. But a lot of people in the paper calls this one a Scandinavian design because there's one professor in the Scandinavia area that popularized this design. It is when a lingual plate is the major connector of choice, but the eggshell alignment of the anterior teeth is such that excessive blockout of interproximal undercut must be made, or there is relief on the gingival margin of the remaining natural teeth. Napakaganda nito because you have gained the advantage of plating all the remaining natural teeth to resist horizontal movement sa ating bilateral distal free end cases, and at the same time it is also hygienic dahil on that point areas sa gingival margin the patient can floss it the patient can can flush all the food debris within the prosthesis. They can use a water pick or a proxy brush just to clean those kind of areas. The problem kasi with lingual plating is sometimes there are a lot of food impaction. But over time, nawawala naman yon. But those are the usual common complaints of the patient. If naglingual plate tayo, marami advantage, but ang disadvantage, maraming food debris na pumapasok. But this Scandinavian design or cingulum bar, napakaganda na kasi kahit papano nalilinis ng patient yung margins ng remaining natural teeth niya. Okay? Sunod, labial bar. Although the use of a labial bar major connector may be necessary in rare instances, It should be avoided by restoring to necessary mouth prep rather than accepting condition that is otherwise correctable. So the same applies to the use of label bar when mandibular torus interferences with the placement of lingual bar. So, ginagamit lang yung label bar, tulad yan, label yung approach if hindi pwede of if a lingual bar because of a mandibular torus is present cannot accept a lingual bar in the lingual surface of our lower arch. Okay, so in that case, mandibular labial bar is indicated. Maxillary major connector, upper naman tayo. So first is a single palatal strap, bilateral tooth supported prosthesis. Even those with short edentulous spaces are effectively connected with a single broad palatal strap. So sabi dito, bilateral tooth supported or tooth bounded cases lang daw. Particularly when the edentulous area are located posteriorly. But for reasons of torque and leverage, a single palatal strap major connector should not be used to connect anterior lip replacement with distal extension bases. So hindi siya pwede kapag distal free end distal free end cases. Ulitin ko, single palatal strap, hindi siya pwede sa mga distal free end cases. Ano yung mga distal free end cases? Class 1 or class 2 Kennedy. So okay siya kapag tooth-bounded cases lang. Another type of major connector ay anterior-posterior palatal strap. It is a rigid palatal major connector may be used in almost any maxillary partial denture design. Strength of this major connector design lies in the fact that anterior and posterior components are joined together, while longitudinal connectors of either side are separated. So trap. So again, anything regarding major connector, okay, ayan, pumasok na yung messages niya. Anyways, anything regarding major connector, it must be rigid as always. Okay, palatal major. It is the most famous or most used maxillary major connector design. Okay, its strength of this major connector lies in the fact that anterior, and posterior components are joined together by longitudinal connectors on either side, forming a square or rectangular frame. Components braces the others against possible torque and flexure. So again, flexure is practically non-existent in the design. Okay? It should always be rigid. Dapat hindi gumagalaw. Okay? Maxillary major connector or the full palatal major connectors are palatal coverage used as a major connector and covering one half or more of the hard palate. Okay? Or the whole palate is covered. Its advantage permits making uniformly thin metal, okay, that reproduces anatomic contours of the patient's own palate. Corrugation in the anatomic replica adds strength to the casting. The thinner casting with adequate rigidity can be made. Kagandahan nito, this is actually one of my favorite major connector. It is because, again, I've discussed it to you before na usually makikita natin sa partial denture cases are distal free end cases. Full palatal cases or full palatal major connector are indicated on class 1 Kennedy class 1 Kennedy cases or bilateral distal free end that has long edentulous free end cases. Katulad nito, mahaba to. In that case, full palatal is indicated together with plating to the remaining natural teeth. Okay, in that way, it can prevent or first, it provides cross-arch stability because it is rigid. Pangalawa, dahil may plating tayo sa remaining natural teeth natin, it can prevent any vertical and horizontal displacement. Okay? Yun yung maganda dyan sa design na yan. U-shaped palatal major connector, the least desirable. Okay, it should never be used arbitrarily. It is only used when large inoperable palatal torus exist. Okay, because principal objection niya is it lacks rigidity that can allow flexure under occlusal load. Hindi pwede yun. Again, dapat rigid siya kahit during function. And it should create bulk to enhance rigidity. That is why it results to increased thickness. So makapal siya. So again, U-shaped palatal connector is not good. Minor connector. Components that serves as a connecting link between the major connector or base of the removable partial denture, such as clasp assembly, indirect retainers, occlusal rest, or cingulum rest. Okay? Its function is to transfer functional stress papunta sa abutment tooth natin. Minor connector arising from major connector makes possible this transfer of functional stress throughout the dental arch. And also, its function is to transfer effect of the retainers, rest, and stabilizing component throughout the prosthesis. Okay? Form and location niya. Minor connector must have sufficient bulk and it must be rigid, so that it can transfer functional stress to the supporting teeth and tissue will be so that it will be effective. Okay? The bulk of minor connector should not be objectionable as well. So, ibig sabihin, dapat hindi siya masyadong malaki. So, this is our minor connector. Okay? Yan. From the major connector, papunta sa component natin. The design of our minor connector should have sufficient bulk and at the same time should have rounded borders. So anything in our design dapat rounded siya. Okay, rounded. Ito, rounded. Okay. Dapat walang sharp angles. Malinaw nandiyan pa kayo Oh, rest naman are components of partial denture of the on a tooth surfaces that provides again vertical support. Again, pag in-emphasize natin ang support, ang meaning niya is to prevent displacement towards the soft tissue. Okay? It should always be located on a properly prepared tooth surface. Rest seat, prepared surface of an abutment to receive the rest. Okay? So yan yung rest natin. Again, its primary purpose of the rest is to provide vertical support. Big sabihin, pine-prevent niya yung prosthesis na pumunta or mag-sink papunta sa soft tissue. That's why it maintains component in their original position, in their planned position. It maintains and establishes occlusal relationship by preventing settling of the denture or pagbagsak ng postiso. Thus, it should prevent impingement of the soft tissue and directs and distribute occlusal load to the abutment teeth. Okay? Rest serves to support the position of partial denture and to resist movement towards the tissue. Okay, may internet pa ako. Form and occlusal rest or yung form ng occlusal rest natin, the outline of occlusal rest should be rounded triangular in shape. Rounded triangular in shape. Rounded triangular in shape. Okay? It should be as long as it is wide and the base of the triangular shape should be at least 2.5 millimeters. Ito yung laki niya, 2.5 millimeters for molars and premolars. Ang usual depth niya to have sufficient bulk of metal for strength and rigidity should be 1.5 millimeters. Yung lalim niya, 1.5 millimeters. Yung laki niya, 2.5 millimeters. Okay? Direct retainers, component parts applied to resist movement away from the teeth and to provide retention. Again, meaning ng retention, it prevent movement or resist displacement away from the soft tissue. Okay? Yun yung meaning ng retention. Unit of a removable dental prosthesis that engages the abutment tooth to resist displacement of the prosthesis away from the basal seat tissue. The erect retainer's ability to resist this movement is greatly influenced by stability and support of the prosthesis. Okay? Diyan pa kayo? Malinaw? Okay. Direct retainers, sufficient retention is provided by two means. Okay, one is its primary retention is accomplished by mechanically by placing retaining elements. Yan yung retaining elements or yung mga clasp sa abutment teeth natin. Secondary retention is provided by intimate contact or intimate relationship of the minor connector with the guiding planes, the denture base, and the major connector papunta sa underlying soft tissue natin. Okay? Similar as of complete denture. Okay? Direct retainer, types of direct retainer. Retention is accomplished by frictional means by engaging a depression in the abutment tooth. So, there are two basic type of direct retainer, intracoronal and exocoronal retainer, but we will focus more on the exocoronal retainer. Dahil ang exocoronal retainer are yung mga clasp type. Most common and used retainer for removable partial denture. Intracoronal retainer is either cast or attached totally within the restored natural contours of the abutment teeth. So direct retainer clasp type, which is most common, retains through a flexible clasp arm. Nasaan yung flexible clasp arm? Ito. On the buccal surface of our abutment, naandun ang retentive clasp arm natin. The arm engages to the external surface of the abutment tooth in a cervical to the greatest convexity of the tooth, meaning dapat below the survey line or sa undercut area ng ating abutment tooth. This is an example also of our retentive clasp. Nandyan pa kayo? Okay. Oh, okay, so when we talk about amount of retention, yung lakas ng retention, sabi dito, for a clasp to be retentive, it must be placed in an undercut area of the tooth where it is forced to deform or when it is forced to activate upon application of vertical dislodging forces. So, dun sa diagram natin, kita nyo sa prosthesis, there is vertical dislodging forces. Kapag there is vertical dislodging forces, the retentive tip or the retentive clasp arm begins its deformation or mag-a-activate siya to prevent this movement. Okay? Ulitin ko, pag may movement away from the soft tissue, then syempre, mag-a-activate ang retention ng prosthesis natin, mag-a-activate ang retentive clasp arm. Ibig sabihin, pupunta yung retentive clasp arm natin, mag-engage siya doon sa undercut area ng abutment tooth natin. Retention is provided primarily by flexible portion of the clasp assembly. The whole retentive clasp arm, ang usually na nag-activate lang is yung retentive clasp tip. Kasi yun lang yung naka-engage dun sa undercut natin. Retentive terminal or the clasp tip are ideally located in measured undercuts in gingival third of the abutment crowns. Okay, so when force acts to dislodge restoration in occlusal direction or away from the soft tissue, retentive arm is forced to deform as it passes from undercut location over the height of contour. Ulitin ko, kapag there is um, vertical dislodgement away from the soft tissue or papunta sa occlusal direction, then mag-activate yung retentive clasp arm natin. Okay? Diyan pa kayo? Okay. Reciprocal clasp arm. So when the direct retainer comes in contact with the tooth, framework must be stabilized against horizontal movement for the required clasp deformation to occur. Stabilization is derived from either cross-arch framework, stabilizing, or reciprocal clasp arm in the same clasp assembly. Reciprocal clasp arm must be in contact during the entire period of retentive clasp deformation. Stabilizing reciprocal clasp arm should always be rigid. Again, dapat ang design should be rigid. Ngayon, sa buccal surface ng abutment natin, nandun naglalay ang clasp arm natin. While on the lingual, stabilize our abutment teeth during deformation or during the activation of the retentive clasp arm tip. Kapag nag-activate siya, syempre dapat may magka-counteract or may magka-counteract nung action na yon. Because if there is no reciprocal arm, then there would be harm in our abutment tooth. Okay? Imagine kapag tinulak masyado ng retentive clasp arm natin, then there could be problem or it is likely to be developed. However, any denture base, whether of resin or metal, and regardless of method of fabrication, should come as close to this ideal as possible. Okay? So, yun lang. Discard. So, do you have question? No question? None naman? Malinaw? Mabuti in-inform ako. So, if no question, uh, next week we will have our quiz via Canvas naman yun. Coverage would be intro to RPD and classification of partially dentulous arch and today's topic, yung components. Okay? Malinaw? Walang question? Kung walang question, you may leave the group. Okay na? I'll see you next week for the quiz.
Ben, thank you po.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, sige.